all, I'm Femily. I am Silicon Valley's gender inclusion consultant, and I'm so excited to be here with you at South by Southwest. I'm here today with Jess Huang. We are going to be talking about the Women in the Workplace report. She is a partner at McKinsey. Hi, Jess.
Hi, Emily.
Hi. It's so good to see you. I am a huge fan of the report. It gives me data every year to validate what women and other onlys have been experiencing in the workplace forever. And I really appreciate you sitting down with me here today.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I am so glad to hear that the report has been useful to you and that you've been sharing it with others.
This is the 6th year that you've done this study.
It is.
It's the largest data set on women in corporate America.
That's right.
And this has been one heck of a year.
It has been one heck of a year.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What did you find?
So you mentioned this is the largest data set that we have in corporate America, and it's the 6th year. And what's been great about this report and why we feel like it's so unique is that we're able to collect this data set year after year after year. And this year we had over 300 companies participate. We surveyed over 40,000 employees during the COVID pandemic to see how they were feeling. And each year we look at this report to do exactly what you said. Let's track and see, what's helping women make it to the top? What's keeping them from getting to the top? And not just their representation across what we call the pipeline of entry level to C-suite, but also what experiences are they having? How is it different than the experiences of men? How are experiences of women of color different from white women, and really digging in. And this year what we saw was that, COVID has really had an impact on women. It's had an impact on everyone, but women in particular.
So before this year, we were seeing nice strides. We were seeing companies doing the right things to make their workplaces better for women. But then this year hit and things kind of changed.
Absolutely. So, when we first started this report, we were surprised because we did the math and we found out that it would take 100 years to reach equity. And that's a long time.
Yeah.
And so every single year we've been making this call to action. And the great news is that in some ways we've seen a lot of improvement. You mentioned the improvement at the top. Last year we saw that there was a 22% increase in women's representation at the C-suite. Unfortunately, this year with COVID, we threatened to wipe away all of that progress. So every year before, we asked and we heard that some of the myths out there were completely wrong. Women were negotiating for raises as much as men were. They were asking for the promotions. And no, women were not planning on leaving the workplace any more than men to go take care of their kids or their households. But this year, for the first time, we heard that that wasn't true. Because of the pandemic, 1 in 4 women told us that they were considering taking a step back from their careers or leaving the workforce altogether. It's not good for corporate America.
No, it's not good. Can you say more? I saw in the study that you talked a lot about the ways in which it was not good for corporate America, but can you share more? It's a really fascinating part of this.
Right, because diversity is not a nice to have.
Right.
It's really important for financial performance, and companies now know this. We've done this research too, year after year. And what we've seen is that when companies have diverse leadership at the top and there's gender diversity, those companies outperform their peers. And we looked at this across 15 countries, 1,000 companies, and the correlation holds. So we know that diversity really does matter. It's not a nice to have.
So when you think about senior women in leadership, what's going on for senior women now that we are in the middle of a pandemic?
Yeah, so, for senior women, it feels like they're taking on the emotional labor, right?
Right.
And they're taking it into the workplace.
Right.
And it's a lot, right? They're more likely to champion other women. They're more likely to champion women of color compared to their, senior male peers.
Right.
This is also something we see with mothers.
Right.
For mothers, for a long time, we've talked about the double shift.
Yeah.
And so it's work at home, work and work. And now with the pandemic, what we found is there's an extra load on top of that. There's who's taking care of the kids? Do the kids need to be homeschooled, or do you need to actually, supervise your schooling over Zoom, over VC? On top of that, a lot of people are taking care of their older parents, right?
Right.
Do we need to do the grocery shopping for them? And all of this is adding up. Moms are telling us that they're really, really burnt out. And in fact, they're 1.5 times more likely than fathers to tell us that they're spending 3 or more additional hours on housework each day.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a part-time job.
Yikes. And so you mentioned fathers. How are they entering into this picture? I mean, the pandemic has been stressful on everyone's home front, whether you're a parent or not, but I'm specifically interested in the father standpoint.
You know, that's a very interesting question. And we looked at fathers and mothers in these heterosexual dual career couple households. Right. And what fathers told us is, 72% of them believe that they are splitting housework equally with their partners. Now, the number, the number for mothers is only 44%. So there is a massive disconnect. And, to add, rub salt on the wound of moms who are spending all this time, their partners aren't even recognizing it.
So that's not the only perception gap that I saw in your research. I saw this gap between people who call themselves allies in the workplace for racial justice and those same people showing in their actions that they're actually doing something for racial justice. Can you say more about that gap?
Let's talk a little bit about this.
Yeah.
Because Black women are having a very difficult time in this pandemic.
Right.
They were always having a hard time in the workplace. So for every challenge a white woman faced, Black women faced that and more. Let's talk about what it only is. Imagine what it's like to be a Black woman who shows up to work, takes the elevator up. You're the only Black woman in the elevator. You get to the office, go to your first meeting. You're the only Black woman in that meeting. It happens throughout the entire day, as you're grabbing lunch at the cafeteria, at happy hour after work. It takes a big toll on you. When you are the only person there and you are representing your entire race and gender, you feel scrutinized. We also know that when you're an only, you're more likely to face microaggressions. So that could look like people being surprised that you're so articulate.
Right.
People being shocked that you're at the meeting to actually run the meeting. All of these things really make it hard for Black women to show up to work and feel like they can perform at their best. And over half of Black women we surveyed told us that they are often the only in the room.
And I know from your research that being the only in the room, it does feel like what you're talking about, that the spotlight is on you. And often, because the spotlight's on you, things that are brewing in a company's toxic culture are also heading through that spotlight towards you. You're just extra amplified in that way. You're more of a target for everything from sexual harassment to other terrible issues in the workplace.
What we heard from Black women is that, during this time of stress, the pandemic, the, recent events in the last year of racial violence, they've had a really tough time. They have been disproportionately impacted. They're 2.5 times more likely to say that they've had to deal with the death of a loved one during the pandemic. And on top of that, they're 1.5 times more likely to say that they don't feel comfortable sharing their grief at the workplace. So it's very, very difficult for them to bring their best selves to work.
Absolutely.
Now, on the flip side, what we found was that when Black women tell us they have allies, they have a very different experience than if they do not have allies. And so what the research actually showed us is Black women with allies have experiences much more similar to white women, whereas Black women without allies are more likely to say that they don't feel supported at work, they don't feel like they can advance, and that they often have to deal with these microaggressions of feeling day to day that they can't perform at their best.
That's huge. It makes me wonder, what should companies be doing? Because it's certainly not, as I know you agree, not on the shoulders of individual Black women to save themselves from this problem. It's not even possible. So what can companies do first of all, what can companies do in terms of this past year that we've had in terms of the racial justice awakening in the US? What should companies be doing there to make sure that Black women are not carrying additional burdens related to that and related to COVID?
Now that we know allyship has such an impact on the experience of Black women and that it really matters, I think companies and employees can really double down on figuring out what they can do to be allies. Interestingly enough, when we asked people whether or not they considered themselves allies to women of color, 2/3 of them said, yes, I raised my hand. I am an ally.
Right.
But then we went a little deeper and we started asking, what actions are you taking to show up for women of color and be allies? And what we actually found was very few people could say that they were consistently taking these actions.
Yeah.
So the intentions are actually quite good,
Right.
but it's not being followed through in the actions people are taking. There's a big role that companies can play here in, enabling employees and taking and channeling those great intentions and transferring them into day-to-day actions.
Sounds like companies need to help their employees go from well-meaning to well-doing.
Absolutely. That's right.
And so what else can companies do in terms of, we're talking a little bit about mothers. What else can companies do to make their workplaces better for mothers? I mean, there's been such a shift where, the data, a certain percent, more people than ever before in the knowledge economy are working at home, in corporate America are working at home. Has that been a good shift for women in the workplace overall? And if not, what should companies do to help it be better for women?
In some ways, the shift and some experiment of, hey, everyone's working remotely has been really interesting because in past years of research, last year, for example, we heard that flexibility was the number one thing people wanted and they thought could make the workplace more inclusive. Well, we all got a lot of flexibility this year, maybe more than we wanted. What we actually found was that some things worked well, right? We've learned new ways of working. There is flexibility. But unfortunately, all of these challenges we've just talked about still persist. And so companies really need to think about how they can address these challenges and make sure that flexibility does not equal starting to take calls at 6 in the morning and being okay to schedule all the way to 8 p.m., right?
So talk to me about the broken rung. I know it has been a major issue in the past. Is it still going on in COVID?
The broken rung is absolutely still an issue. What we found is that one of the biggest hurdles to women making it all the way to the C-suite is actually not promotion at the top. It's that first step up to manager. And so what you actually see there is for every 100 men who are promoted, only 85 women are promoted. Oof. That's 71 Latinas, and even worse for Black women, it's 58 Black women. And so if you think about the old, adage of, hey, men are promoted on potential, women are promoted on past performance, we're seeing that play out here. And at the entry level, it's very, very difficult. How much past performance, can you build up if you've just started your job?
So you've given lots of examples of what companies can do, and that's certainly the best way to move the lever is with companies doing things at the policy level and across the board. But if there are individual women listening and they want to know what should they do with this new information on this fascinating talk that they have just digested, what can they start to do besides, of course, allying up to the Black women in their office, which is very clear and necessary?
Well, I think first and foremost, let's give ourselves some grace. Let's all recognize that, the experiences people are having are real. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who have said, oh, thank God you put out this report because you have put my feelings on paper with numbers. And I know it's not just me and what I've been experiencing.
Right.
And so, number one, it always just sort of brings out of me you're not alone, right? Let's all acknowledge that this is not your problem. This is our problem. This is the company's problem. This is corporate America's problem. And it's something that we will have to address together. So that's the first thing.
Right.
And then I think, to your point, the second thing is think about how you can show up and be there for the people around you. And also, maintain that open line of communication with companies.
What are some don'ts that companies shouldn't do that are just not an effective use of time? I know you mentioned, the report mentions having Black women just start a support group. That's not as effective as other things. So what are some ways in which companies are going wrong?
The first biggest don't is don't assume there is a simple solution or a silver bullet. And don't assume that you can have one solution that will solve the challenge of every single one of your employees. That is far and away the biggest don't. It is so important to realize that it's not going to be one thing, it's many things, and they need to be targeted at specific challenges that potentially specific groups of your employees are facing. So take Black women, for example. Don't just assume that your solutions for women overall or your, women's resource group are going to work for Black women. Likewise, don't assume that your resource group for your Black employees are going to solve the challenges of Black women. We know that Black women are having very distinct challenges and distinct, experiences. So focus on those. Understand what those experiences are. And the last thing I would say is companies, should not just give up, right? And say, hey, women are leaving the workforce. There's nothing we can do about it. Companies should view this as an opportunity to really think about how this could be used for good. Companies should view it as an opportunity and not let a crisis go to waste, and actually say, hey, we're going to do something about this point in time, and it's going to set us up for more, a better workplace in the future.
So a lot of women ask about mentorship as a tool. Should they find a mentor? How do they find a mentor? And so I would love to hear what the data says about that.
You're right. Mentorship is really important.
Yeah.
It's important to have someone who you can talk to, who can advise you, who can problem solve with you when you're running into a situation, and could really use someone to guide you along. But let's actually talk about something else, not just mentorship, but sponsorship. Because what we found is that more important than having a mentor, you need to have a sponsor. And being a sponsor for someone is something that's very powerful and could be huge in helping women advance in the workplace. So what does it mean to be a sponsor? That means you are actively looking for ways to create opportunities for someone to advance their career or to show up and perform at their best. And so this could be anything from creating a stretch opportunity for someone so that, they have more visibility in the organization with more senior leadership. It could be something as simple as, talking to your colleague or a peer and mentioning, hey, have you ever worked with Femily? She's great. I worked with her on this project and she really knocked it out of the park. You should consider her for your next thing. All of these little things that are directed towards creating opportunity for advancement, that's sponsorship. And that's very powerful. And it's something that, not only do women need to do, but men need to do. And sometimes it's tempting to think about sponsoring people who look just like you, right? Because it's most comfortable. You went to the same school, you have a similar background, you grew up in the same town. But it's really thinking about how you sponsor people that are not like you that will help make a difference here. If you think about the pipeline and the fact that there are just so many more men than women at senior levels, what will make a big difference is for senior men to support women and sponsor them. I myself have benefited hugely from senior men at McKinsey, creating opportunities for me, sometimes putting me in situations where I felt I was totally unprepared, but they really felt like I could rise to the challenge and succeed. And without that, I would not be a partner at McKinsey today.
I love it. So it sounds like individuals can get a mentor, and that's helping you with the emotional side and experiential and relatability, and perhaps someone who is more like you. And then also individual women should seek out sponsors who will use their, cultural capital and social capital to really advocate for them within the workplace. And can companies also create sponsorship situations or initiatives to help foster this activity? Is this something that would be helpful?
Absolutely. Companies can be very deliberate about sponsorship. And something that, actually we do at McKinsey is we have a very formalized sponsorship program. We do two things. The first thing is we'll send out a survey and we'll ask people who their sponsors are. And we will also ask people who they are sponsoring. We love data.
Yes.
So collecting this data allows us to see who is lacking that sponsorship, right? And where are the connections a little bit uneven?
Right.
And on top of that, what you can do is then you can say, let's make sure we have a sponsor for every single person that we want to make sure can, rise to their potential at our company. So, for us, we think about, let's make sure every female manager has a sponsor who formally has signed up and said, I am going to create opportunities for her. We do the same thing for our colleagues of color and for our LGBTQ colleagues as well. And it's something that we put a lot of deliberate effort into because we know the patterns of being more likely to sponsor someone who's already like you. And so by putting that, policy or program in place, it really just forces us to make sure that everyone has a sponsor and everyone has that equal opportunity to succeed.
Right, especially in terms of allyship, if one of the questions was, are you an ally, would you like to be? And one of the actions that makes you a good ally is I'm sponsoring someone who doesn't look like me or live like me. Yeah, it's building that into the company culture. I love it, rather than leaving it up to happenstance of whoever finds the time or the wherewithal to care about it.
It's taking the intention and turning it into action.
So Jess, this report is called the Women in the Workplace Report, but not because women are supposed to fix the workplace. It's a problem for all genders. The solutions lie with all genders tackling this. What should men be doing right now?
There is so much that men can do. And it's not just men who are at the top of the C-suite. It's men at all organizations who can support their colleagues who are women. It could be anything from, if you're a senior leader, think about what it's like for your colleague who was the only woman in the room and help take some of that pressure off of her. She, now is doing a disproportionate amount of allyship work within the company. Take some of that on. Sponsor some of the more junior women she's sponsoring and create those opportunities for them. It can also look like a male employee taking advantage of their absence days, even though they may not feel like they are the ones that are burnt out and need it, because their partner or their spouse is actually burnt out and really needs it. Recognize that, there's a very, very high chance that your wife or the mother of your children is taking on way more of the household work than you are. All of these things in terms of recognizing the problem and finding very small, specific ways to actually address them can go a very long way. And it doesn't have to be big, right? You don't have to be the CEO who is enacting a sweeping wide program or policy in the company. It can actually be the day-to-day things where you make sure that if someone is interrupted, you redirect the conversation back to her, or you make space for them in the conversation to start with and give them credit for their idea. All of those little things can really add up. And all of those things can make a big difference for the experience of women in the workplace and down the line, the representation of women in the workplace.
Jess, it's been such a pleasure. I really enjoyed hearing the data, hearing the stories. I really appreciate you bringing the facts to life. I don't love what the data is showing me, but I love that we have data to be able to now talk about it in a way that's on the science side as well as the story and the art side. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming to talk about all of these issues and all of these topics that have been water cooler conversations and employee resource group conversations and women sharing with each other about the realities of their workplace. But now that there's been this report for 6 years, the data is here and we can all feel like it's real and here's what we need to do about it.
We are really, really glad that we have the data. And, we're staying tuned for next year, right? The numbers will potentially be very, very different.
Right.
We want to see what it will actually look like in terms of the representation across the pipeline, as well as how companies have been addressing some of these challenges, because we know companies are trying And we also want to see how the experiences of women may have continued to evolve. Thank you.